All right, let's go ahead and get started. I hope for those of y'all who are in CyberPal's group, you got a chance to meet with your CyberPal officers. If you're not in a if you're not in a CyberPal's group already and you're interested, just like send a message to the Discord. You can DM any of the officers and we'll get you put in a group. But yeah, active membership, you guys know the drill by now, so I'm not going to talk about it. Oh, we don't really have too many announcements other than we will have a talk by Professor Tien next Wednesday. So if you're interested in learning more about the security or the research that's being done in our lab, it's also a great way to like just talk with her and chat about what's going on if you're interested in like doing work in our lab. And then, yeah, I guess I'll just hand it off directly to Arnav to talk about RNG manipulation.
Hello, everyone. Today we'll be talking about the Minecraft RNG and some funny things you can do with it. It gets pretty crazy, as you'll be able to see. So a quick introduction into how Minecraft works is that you enter a seed into your world, and it will procedurally generate all the blocks in the world using like some kind of form of a random distribution. But you can do a lot of interesting things with the way the RNG works. You can make devices that speed up in-game random ticks to make your crops grow faster. You can determine the seed of a world, like the random seed of a world, just by observing things like the end portals or like looking at where the cactuses are laid out, stuff like that. And there was this exploit that people found, I think, like 2 years ago called Randar, where you can find the coordinate locations of other players on your server just by mining a block and exploiting the random number generator. So how does Minecraft generate random numbers, or how do computers do that in general? They use a thing called a PRNG, or a pseudo-random number generator. And it's just an algorithm that starts with a fixed seed that you enter first. And then every time you call the algorithm, it'll generate a new quote-unquote random number. The way it does this is that it stores an internal state, and then it transforms the state to a new state every time you call the random number generator. And each time this transformation happens, the output should look random. PRNGs are deterministics, which means that if you know their state, you know what numbers they'll generate in the future. And this is different from true randomness because a truly random process shouldn't be predictable no matter what. So to get true random numbers, you have to use some hardware device. Now, the problem with that is that these hardware devices are a lot slower than just running some algorithm on your computer that computes these numbers really fast. So oftentimes we will use PRNGs. PRNGs can be quote unquote cryptographically secure or just a general purpose. General purpose PRNGs are designed to run really fast, be simple, and approximate randomness to a good enough degree. They're not meant for like security intensive applications. Versus cryptographically secure PRNGs should look random, and it should be impossible to distinguish them from an actual random sample. So with all that background, let's get into how the PRNG in Minecraft actually works. In most programming languages, they have a random module, and when you call their random module, you will use a general purpose PRNG to generate numbers. Notice here that says a general purpose PRNG. So usually when you call this random function, it'll use an insecure PRNG because you're not supposed to use these numbers for actual cryptography or making things secret. There are different special modules to generate secure random numbers. Java is what's used to program Minecraft, and it uses a PRNG called an LCG. What an LCG does is like that equation there, where xn is the current state. So to find the next state, what you do is you multiply it by the number a, then you add c, and then you take the remainder modulo m. If you know what a modulo, if you don't know what a modulo is, it's kind of like a remainder. So you just divide it by m, and then you take the remainder, and that's your next state. LCGs are good at generating a random quote unquote distribution, but the problem with them is that they're not secure at all. The first vulnerability that they have is that they're very periodic. If you know what M is, you can easily figure out the period of the LCG, and like basically it will repeat random numbers after a certain number of iterations. Another thing about LCGs is that if you know the state and coefficients, you can easily skip forward a bunch of steps or go backwards a bunch of steps, which is super easy to do, not any harder than just doing it one by one. So going back to the question.
I was curious like about what's the boundary exactly between pseudo random and random?
Okay, yeah. So pseudo random the boundary is here, where pseudo-random is deterministic, and random, like it's impossible to predict what the next random number is. Yeah. And that is a different distinction between secure and insecure. Okay. So going back to the point about periodicity, certain LCGs, including Minecraft's, have even more periodic like properties or patterns. Specifically, the last k bits of them repeat with period 2 to the k. So for example, this is a sequence of numbers that the Minecraft LCG could generate. So we put these all in binary form. If you guys are unfamiliar with that, it's just base 2. You take the number, instead of in base 10, you write it in base 2, and it represents the same number. But as you can see, if we generate a sequence of numbers that go 0, 1, 0, 1, 0, 1 for the last bit, and the second to last bit also has, or if you like take the last 2 bits, they repeat with period 4, or sorry, with period, period 4, and so on. So the last k bits repeat with period 2 to the power of k. And what this allows us to do is this funny thing to control Minecraft random ticking. So Minecraft chooses when to grow crops and update some certain types of blocks using a thing called a random tick. So every game tick, which is 1/20th of a second, each section of the world called a subchunk, which is 16 by 16 by 16 blocks, randomly picks 3 blocks inside of it to cause to random tick. But the interesting part here is that inside the subchunk, the X and Z positions only depend on the last 13 bits of the LCG output. And like we said before, the last 13 bits are going to repeat with period 2 to the 13, which is 8,192. So if we force our world to have exactly 8,192 tickable subchunks in it, that means that the positions where these ticks are going to happen are going to be the same every single time, right? Well, in theory, that's what should happen. In practice, it's a bit more complicated because of the way the code works. There are also other random ticks that affect the state of the LCG called ice and snow ticks. So what you have to do is that you have to kind of create a device that detects the number of random ticks that happen in the world, detect how different that is from the number 8,192. From that, determine what state the LCG is, and then add or remove extra subchunks to get the number back to 8,192. This is very complicated. There's a YouTube video that goes over that, which is what I got my inspiration from. But basically, now the idea is that in every subchunk, we can now force the LCG to always cause random ticks in the same position every time, which means that we can create, like, it's kind of hard to see, but he made it like a purple pillar here, which is an amethyst farm. And now it's growing 90 times as fast as it would in a normal world because the random ticks are always happening in that specific position. So now it's basically like growing way faster than like it would normally. But the thing is, you have to have exactly 8,192 tickable subchunks in your world, which means you have to like delete the rest of your world. So no one is ever building this in survival because who is building something like this? This is actually insane. So there are some more practical things you can do with this. So going back to the LCG, in the simplest case of an LCG, it'll just output its entire state. But when we're attacking an LCG, we don't need to know like the actual entire state of the LCG. What we can observe are quote unquote constraints on its outputs. Most languages only output like the upper bits of an LCG. They'll chop the lower bits off, and when you ask for a random number, they'll only give you the upper bits. Suppose that we know the upper B bits of an LCG output. This allows us to put an inequality on the value of the actual state. So for example, known bits shifted to the left by the amount of bits we know is less than or equal to the value we observe, which is less than or equal to known bits plus 1 shift left. Basically, what this is saying is that if we aren't observing the full LCG output, then instead of saying that the LCG state is equal to something, now we have an inequality that gives us partial information on the LCG state. And you can do a lot with these inequalities. One thing you can do is Minecraft seed cracking. So for example, when generating end portals, Minecraft will basically like try to fill in these eyes of Ender with fill in these end portals with eyes of Ender by random chance. Each portal has a 1/10th chance of being filled. And what we want maybe is to find a world where all 12 of them are filled before we even like do anything. This is useful for like speed runs where you kind of like enter an end portal that's already filled without you having to like find your own ISA vendor. But if we want that to be the case, what would have to happen is that the RNG generates a number that satisfies the 1/10 probability 12 times in a row. And the way that happens is that it just generates a number, checks if it's greater than 9/10 times the maximum value, and does that 12 times in a row. So this actually gives us 12 inequalities on the value of the LCG output. And using those inequalities, we can use a thing called lattices to solve for the seed that causes this to be true. This is like pretty complicated math, and if you're interested, you can talk to me, but I won't really go over it. But this is how people find seeds where the eyes of end are already filled and you don't have to add any more. You can do similar things with like cacti and dungeons and trees just by observing their locations, because they're all randomly generated. You can figure out what seed is used to create the world just from those observations and from some math. Yeah?
Is this the same uppermost bits that are used every single time you're generating a different I vendor, or is it?
In this case, it's not really the upper bits, because what happens here is that it generates the number completely, and then it checks if it's greater than 9/10 times the maximum value. Because that creates a 1/10 chance of succeeding, right? So now your inequality is that it has to be greater than 9/10 times the maximum value. But it's still an inequality on the LCG output. So these like 12 inequalities, you can use them in kind of like, it's kind of like linear algebra, except with inequalities instead of equations. But you can use them to like solve for original seed that satisfies those inequalities. Yeah. But there's more that we can do with these methods. For example, when you mine a block in Minecraft, as you can see in this GIF, it'll kind of fall, the item will like kind of fall in a random direction. It went this way here, but it could go behind the tree next time I mine it, or to the left or to the right. These random directions are generated by the LCG as well. So this actually gives us information or inequalities on the LCG outputs. That's great. So we can find the seed from that as well. So let's go into some more details about how things are generated in Minecraft. When Minecraft generates new chunks, it has to decide whether to generate a woodland mansion in that chunk. So like this big structure, it has to say yes or no. Am I putting this big structure here? And the important thing here is that this check is done independently for each chunk. So every time you load a new chunk, Minecraft is asking yes or no, am I putting this here? So the way that they implement this is that they use the world PRNG to generate the random events in Minecraft. Like for example, when the block drops from the tree, like all the random animations that happen, they use this thing called the world PRNG. But when deciding to generate woodland mansions, they will reseed the world PRNG with their current chunk just because of the way the algorithm works. And then it'll generate the mansion if the numbers that the RNG generates equals your coordinates. I think that's this line of code right here. It will generate some random, it will reseed the random number generator, then generate some numbers, and only generate the mansion if the chunk is equal to your X and Y. So basically what this is saying is that every time you enter a new chunk, the world RNG is reseeded with your current coordinates, which is interesting because if you find that seed, that kind of tells you that what someone else's coordinates are. This isn't what's supposed to happen. This is like pretty terrible coding, because what's supposed to happen is that you use different RNGs for, like generating these woodland mansions versus an animation in Minecraft that anyone else on the server can see. So this code is pretty bad, and it was fixed in version 1.13. Basically, what was happening is that the RNG was being shared between placing woodland mansions and dropping items. And every time someone visits a new chunk, it's being reseeded. What should be happening is that there are two independent RNGs where one is being reseeded to decide where to put woodland mansions, but there's a separate one that generates all the in-game events that everyone else can see. So, oh yeah, question?
It's just telling you where exactly the person is if they're visiting a new chunk that might have a web.
Yes, exactly. So yeah, the exploit works by you first mine a block, observe how the item falls, use these observations to create lattice inequalities on the LCG, the world LCG, you can find the state of the world LCG, go backwards some amount of steps to find what the seed of the LCG is, and that seed is a function of the location of a different player on the server. Now, this is actually really complicated, how to reverse that function, but I won't get into that. But you can reverse that function. So now you can basically track which chunks are being loaded by other players in real time in your world just by mining some random block anywhere. I wonder if this will work, but I have a little video of it. This is like someone using the exploit I think it was discovered in 2B2T actually, if anyone knows what that is. But yeah, you can just track where other players are going just by like continuously mining a block. And yeah, that's what it looks like. You can see like where everyone's going. So there's a lot more to these exploits that I didn't go over today. The main one is how to actually use lattices in these exploits. If you want to talk to me about that, feel free. This is one of my favorite topics. And another very interesting problem in Randar especially is how to step forward and backward the LCG. How do we know how many times we have to actually do that stepping? Because we have to get back to the original seed of the LCG. And the LCG was called some amount of times before it was reseeded with the Woodland Mansion. So we have to figure out how many steps we have to take forward or backward. The other thing is, what is the function between your chunk coordinates and the actual seed that is used in the world LCG? This is a very interesting problem as well. This is what I was talking about with the function being hard to reverse, but it is possible to reverse. And there's much more. So there's a write-up on Randar. I think it's on GitHub. You can look at that if you want. It goes into much more detail than this talk did. And also, you can check out this guy named Matthew Bolon on YouTube. He goes over a lot of funny Minecraft math for speedrunning, including the like lattices and seed cracking stuff. Yeah, that should be it. Any questions? Any questions? No questions? Okay. Thank you for coming. Hope you found it interesting.
Okay, real quick announcement. So, our first ECTF workshop, where we're actually going to be teaching stuff, is tomorrow, 6 to 8 in the engineering 4 Maxwell room. So just go up to the 5th floor and hopefully you bump into someone else. If not, just keep walking around. You'll see us. Cyber Lab or our second Cyber Lab will be happening Wednesday, right here, 6 to 8, with a talk on SLNgs from Katie. And then big news, our first CTF that we're playing as PBR is this Saturday. So it has finally come upon us. So yeah, I guess yeah, so the CTF, these things are usually like they're online, and so when they start, like, you know, you can start looking at the challenges yourself. But if you've never done it before or don't even know where to look, we will be like meeting together in person. So we usually start at 1 p.m. and we'll be in the engineering for Tesla room. So same building as the ECTF workshop, but just a different room. And it does say 1 to 6 p.m. And if you're thinking to yourself, wow, 5 hours, that's a long time. You don't have to show up for the very beginning. You don't have to stay the whole time. If you can only make like, 2 hours out of that, that's all right. Oh,
just wanted to say, like, before all our PBR meetings, we usually have lunch at 11:30, somewhere around. So we'll announce that, but you should definitely come to that. Because we'll enter like the room together after.
yeah. So if you didn't catch that, we do usually try to get lunch together before CTF start. And yeah, I guess if you live off the hill, this is a chance for you to like maybe get swiped if someone is generous. Hopefully someone is. I would like that very much. Anyways. And then a few more things. So some socials to be aware of. CTF IRL. So this is like ye old capture the flag, except instead of flags, we have 3D printed lemon things. So yeah, you get to, come out to the IM fields with us. It's a great time. So this is going to be November 1st, starting at 6 p.m. at the intramural fields. So this is 1 week after Dead Face, so in like 2 weeks or approximately. And then sort of announcing this pretty far in advance, but mid-November, we're gonna have our cyber potluck. So that's like we go out to one of the university apartments where there are grills, make burgers and hot dogs, and then if you have other stuff you want to bring, you can. So yeah, if you plan on coming to that, please let us know so we can so we know how much food to get. Yeah.
And for the potluck, if you don't want to bring, like, if you want to bring something, that's great. But if you don't want to bring anything or just don't want to spend money, that's also totally fine. Like, the club covers the costs of most of the primary, like meats and stuff. So don't worry about like costs for that.
Yep. Okay, so that's all for announcements. As always, if you have any feedback, you can use this QR code or go to l.acmcyber.com/feedback. And otherwise, yeah, well, let's split off into our normal groups.
Yeah, you can just leave the meeting and it should stop as well.